Today is the first anniversary of the Pittsburg Tree of Life synagogue shooting, where 11 congregants were tragically and senselessly murdered in Pennsylvania.
But with reports of anti-Semitism continuing to rise, people want to know, has anything been done? Well, here to discuss is Shai Avshalom Zavdi, head of media relations with the American Jewish Committee in Israel and the director of the AJC Access Israel. Thank you so much for coming in. Now, has anything changed in the United States in terms of religious attacks and anti-Zionism, etc.?
So we do feel a surge in more and more attacks against Jews in the U.S., anti-Semitic attacks. When we asked recently, we did a survey asking American Jews how they feel, if they feel safer or less safe in the last 5 years, and the results are pretty devastating. Almost half of the Jews feel that the situation now is worse than last year.
Is this relating in real numbers of incidents as well, or maybe are the numbers inflated a little bit by additional reporting?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure about that, but people do feel less safe. And if we're talking about feelings...
Why do you think that's the case?
Because we see more and more, let's say, lethal attacks. For example, the attack in Pittsburg. This is something that we haven't seen in years. 12 people die is an unprecedented thing. Also, just 6 months later, exactly 6 months later, we had the attack in Poway, California, taking the life of another person. This is something that we haven't had before.
Now, what's very interesting here is kind of the line between what is anti-Semitism versus anti-Zionism. And, we seem to see, more anti-Israel, I don't know if propaganda is the right word, but bias on college campuses more specifically. Is that translated and understood as being anti-Semitic in the United States, or are those two things deemed to be unrelated?
So if you're asking the Jews, definitely anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism.
But there's still many young Jews who feel that they're, moving further away from the state of Israel.
Yes, but this is a different kind of a thing, because they feel they're more connected to liberal values. It's not that they're against Israel, it's they're against Israel policies. Mm-hmm. This is different. Well, you see non-Jews talking about having anti-Zionist expressions. For example, the Jews in the U.S. are the reason why the U.S. supports Israel, because of the Jewish money. This is something that is completely anti-Semitic, and I'm 100% sure that we as Israelis can relate to that as well.
Right.
Well, and so how much do you see Israel specifically legitimately relating to incidents of anti-Semitism, et cetera, versus maybe the political climate worldwide or in America specifically?
So first of all, Israel is offering help and aid to Jewish communities in the U.S. For example, right after the attack in Pittsburgh, we had a few politicians and leaders fly from Israel to the U.S. to express their support. We have more and more let's say consultations when it comes to security. We also see about half of the synagogues in the U.S. felt attacked, and they actually took measures. They have now, be it policemen outside or security guards that they hired.
I still kind of want to get to what the roots of this issue are. I mean, anti-Semitism has obviously always existed. It hasn't necessarily gone away. And there are a lot of people who are blaming U.S. President Donald Trump for promoting more white supremacy. But at the same time, he is pro-Israel, especially in terms of his relationship with Netanyahu and his, you could say, advocacy for the Jewish community. So where is this coming from? Could you pinpoint that in any way?
So we do see a surge both from the right and from the left, two extremes. We also asked in our recent survey the Jews, who do they feel is more a threat? Okay. And we saw very, very high numbers, both from the extreme left and from the extreme right. We see people from both sides. Now you have to take into account also that about 70% of the Jews in America are Democrats. And so most of them are aligned with that party. President Trump is with the competing party, and so there is kind of a sentiment in that way.
I want to know if there is an effective sort of response to the rise in anti-Semitism, because it seems that the responses we've had so far worldwide have been sort of a double-edged sword, where the more the Jewish community or the world community responds to anti-Semitism, the worse it seems to get.
That is true, and we do need to find new ways, let's say more lethal ways to address this issue. So, for example, AJC turned to world leaders and also to mayors in both levels, municipal and national, and ask them to condemn such attacks and to call anti-Semitism a thing that should not happen.
Right.
So, for example, just in recent days, we had about 67, if I recall correctly, mayors from Ohio call October 27th the day for action against anti-Semitism. Same in New York. The governor of New York also joined this call.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us with this update. Very, very interesting.
Thank you, Shai.